The wind came first, slipping through the broken boards of the shack like a living thing, carrying dust and cold from the forgotten trails beyond the hills. It whistled low and lonely, as if it knew the land had little mercy left to give. Out here, on the edge of an old west town that barely remembered its own name, silence was heavier than sound. It pressed down on the chest, teaching a man how to endure or how to break. Eli Boone stood just beyond the door, hat pulled low, boots half buried in dry earth. He had not spoken a full sentence in months. Folks in town said grief had taken his words, the way the prairie took water when the sun stayed too long. They said he was a good cowboy once, steady with a rope, fair with a hand, but now he drifted between days like a shadow. Frontier life had a way of stripping men down to what they truly were, and Eli was a man carved by loss. Inside the shack, the sound of a hammer rose and fell. It was not loud, but it was certain. Each strike pushed back against the wild, against the years that had bent the walls and split the roof. The woman working there had hands roughened by cold and labor, hands that once laid flowers on a shallow grave not far from the cottonwoods. Her name was Eliza Crow, and she had buried her husband before the last snow melted. She had come west with him chasing a promise that never learned how to keep itself. He had dreamed of land and quiet, of a place where a man could start clean. Instead, sickness took him in the second winter, leaving Eliza with a child, a failing shack, and a grief that settled into her bones. Her hands had learned to work because there was no other choice. In the Wild West love story she never asked to live, survival came before sorrow. Her boy Thomas sat near the hearth, small fingers tracing shapes in the dirt floor. He did not cry much anymore. The frontier taught children early that tears did not change the weather or fill an empty pot. Still, his eyes followed every movement his mother made, as if afraid she might fade like his father had. Eli watched them from the doorway, his presence quiet, almost ghost-like. He had known Eliza's husband in passing, shared a drink once in the old west town before the saloon closed for good. He had helped lower the coffin into the ground, had stood there unable to speak, the weight of another man's ending pressing into his chest. Since then, words came hard. Silence felt safer. The shack itself told a story of Western survival. Its boards were mismatched, scavenged from forgotten trails and abandoned wagons. A storm had torn part of the roof loose the year before, and snow had crept in like an uninvited guest. Eliza had patched it with her own hands, climbing up with fear in her throat and resolve in her spine. Every nail she drove was a promise to her son that they would endure. Beyond the shack, the land stretched wide and unforgiving. Sagebrush and stone, broken by the distant line of hills where the sun sank red each evening. Sometimes, just before dusk, a small group of native people passed along the ridge, moving quiet and steady. An older woman from their band had once stopped to show Eliza how to seal cracks with clay and ash. No words were shared, but the lesson was clear. In this place, help often came without explanation. Eli remembered those people from long ago, remembered a Native American tale his mother once told him about listening more than speaking. He wondered if that was why he stayed silent now, as if words might disturb something fragile. He felt drawn to the shack, to the sound of hammer on wood, to the woman who refused to be broken. Eliza sensed him there and paused. She did not turn right away. Men came and went in frontier life, some offering help, others offering trouble. But Eli had never crossed the line of her space. He stood like a fence post, weathered and still. "You can come in if you like," she said at last, her voice calm but tired. Eli stepped inside, removing his hat. The air smelled of dust and wood sap. He nodded once, a small motion, then set his eyes on the loose beam above the door. Without speaking, he picked up a tool and braced the board while Eliza drove the nail home. Their movements fell into an easy rhythm, two people working without need for words. Thomas watched with careful interest. To him, this quiet man was something new, not loud or demanding, just present. In a land where men often came roaring like storms, Eli felt like shade. As the light faded, the wind rose again, stronger now. It rattled the walls and made the repaired boards groan. Eliza felt a flicker of fear, wondering if her work would hold. Eli tightened his grip, his jaw set. He had seen worse storms. He had survived worse nights. When the last nail was set, Eliza leaned back, her arms aching. She looked at the wall, then at Eli. Their eyes met, and in that moment the silence between them felt full instead of empty. A Wild West love story did not begin with grand words or promises. Sometimes it began with shared labor and unspoken understanding. From outside came the distant sound of hooves, slow and deliberate. Eli's body stiffened. Visitors were rare on forgotten trails and not always welcome. Eliza felt it too, the shift in the air, the warning carried by the wind. Eli moved toward the door, hand resting near his belt, not in threat but in readiness. Eliza drew Thomas closer, her repaired shack standing between them and whatever approached. The hooves stopped just beyond sight. Silence returned, heavier than before, carrying the weight of what had been lost and what might still be taken. The hooves shifted again, slow and deliberate, pressing into the dry earth as if testing it. Eli held still, listening. Years on the range had taught him that danger rarely announced itself. Eliza felt her breath shorten. She had learned the same lesson since coming west, though hers had been taught through hunger and loss rather than gunsmoke. A rider finally came into view, just one man, his shape blurred by dust and the falling light. He sat tall but loose in the saddle, the way men did when they believed the land owed them something. Eli did not move his hand from his belt, but he did not raise it either. Silence, he had learned, often made men show themselves faster than words. The rider tipped his hat in a lazy way. He did not speak at first, just let his horse breathe and snort. "Evening," he said at last, his voice carrying a thin edge. "Didn't expect to find folks still breathing out here." Eli gave a short nod. Eliza stepped forward, her shoulders squared despite the tightness in her chest. Frontier life had taught her that fear only grew when it was fed. "We keep to ourselves," she said. "That's usually enough." The rider's eyes moved over the shack, the patched boards, the child half hidden behind Eliza's skirt. His gaze lingered too long. Eli felt something twist low in his gut, a familiar warning. He had once failed to listen to it, and the cost had been more than he could carry easily. After a moment, the rider shrugged. "Just passing through." He turned his horse, dust rising as he rode off toward the old west town, his silhouette swallowed by the darkening land. The night settled slow but heavy. Eliza closed the door and leaned her weight against it, her hand trembling despite her effort to still it. Eli stepped back, giving her space. He had learned that grief needed room like a wound that could not be rushed to close. They sat in the dim light, the small fire casting shadows that stretched and bent across the walls. Thomas curled near the hearth, already half asleep, his thin shoulders rising and falling. Eliza watched him for a long moment, then finally spoke. "He doesn't remember his father much," she said softly. "Maybe that's a kindness." Eli nodded. He remembered too well. His own family had been taken by a winter that stayed too long and a promise of work that led him away at the wrong time. When he returned, the cabin was empty, the stove cold. No graves, just absence. Silence had followed him ever since, settling into his bones like frost. He cleared his throat, the sound rough. "Sometimes remembering hurts," he said. The words surprised him as much as they did her. Eliza looked at him then, really looked, seeing the lines carved deep by sun and sorrow. She saw a man shaped by the same land that had shaped her by broken promises and quiet endurance. The distance between them was still there, but it felt thinner now, like a trail worn by repeated steps. Outside, a coyote cried, the sound long and aching. Eliza shivered. She had learned the songs of the night, how they could mean hunger or warning or both. The Wild West love story she once imagined had not included nights like this, where fear sat beside hope at the same small table. Eli stood and moved to the window, peering into the dark. "That rider?" he said slowly. "Men like that don't wander alone without reason." Eliza's jaw tightened. She had felt it too. The land was hard, but people were often harder. In the old west town, whispers traveled faster than the wind. A woman alone was noticed. A woman with land, even poor land, was remembered. "I won't leave," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "This place is all we have left." Eli did not answer right away. He had spent years drifting, afraid to stay anywhere long enough to lose again. Yet something about the repaired shack, the steady hands that had rebuilt it, pulled at him. Western survival was not just about enduring storms. It was about choosing where to stand. He took a step back from the window. "I can stay a while," he said. "If you want." Eliza studied his face, searching for signs of false kindness. She found none. Still, mistrust was a shield she could not afford to lower too quickly. "We don't have much," she said. "I don't need much," Eli replied. The night deepened, and with it came memories that refused to stay buried. Eliza dreamed while awake of her husband's laughter, the way he had spoken of fields and fences as if they were already real. She remembered the sickness, the helpless watching, the day she wrapped him in a blanket, and knew he would not rise again. The land had taken him, just as it had taken so many others. Eli sat near the door, his back against the wall, listening to the sounds beyond the shack. He thought of his brother, buried somewhere along a forgotten trail, of a promise to send money home that never reached its mark. The Old West had been built on such broken lines, on dreams that faded under too much sun. Toward dawn, a distant sound rolled across the plains, not thunder but something close enough to it. Hooves again, more than one this time, carried on the cold air. Eli's eyes opened. Eliza felt it too, the tightening in her chest returning. Whatever had passed by earlier was not finished with them. The land held its breath, and so did they, waiting for the next step to fall. Morning came thin and pale, spreading slowly across the land as if unsure it was welcome. The frost had crept in overnight, whitening the ground and stiffening the patched boards of the shack. Eli rose before the sun cleared the hills, moving quiet so as not to wake the others. He stepped outside and studied the tracks pressed into the dirt beyond the door. More than one horse, just as he feared. They had passed close enough to watch. Frontier life taught a man to read the ground the way others read books. Eli saw hesitation in the way the hooves had turned, the mark of men who lingered instead of riding straight on. Trouble did not always arrive with raised voices. Often it came waiting, patient as the land itself. Inside, Eliza woke to the sound of him returning. She sat up, drawing the blanket around her shoulders. Sleep had not brought her rest. Dreams of sickness and shallow graves had followed her through the night. "You saw something," she said quietly. Eli met her eyes and nodded. "They're nearby. Don't know what they want yet." Fear flickered across her face, quickly mastered. She had learned to carry it without letting it spill. "Then we go on as usual," she said. "That's all we can do." Thomas stirred and sat up, rubbing his eyes. He sensed the change in the air, the way children often did. Eliza forced a small smile for him, though her heart tightened. She thought of the old West town and its unspoken rules. A woman alone could not expect protection. Help always came with a price. As the day unfolded, Eli stayed close, repairing a fence line that barely stood and checking the small corral. Eliza worked beside him when she could, their movements falling into an easy rhythm again. There was comfort in shared labor, in the quiet understanding that passed between them without words. At midday, a small group approached from the ridge. Not the riders from the night before, but the native family Eliza had seen before. The older woman raised a hand in greeting. Eliza returned it, relief softening her shoulders. They traded a few goods, dried meat for cloth, and shared a brief moment of rest in the sun. The older woman studied Eli with calm eyes. She spoke softly in a language Eliza did not know, then placed a small bundle of herbs in Eliza's hand, a warning, perhaps, or a blessing. In a Native American tale Eli half remembered, such gestures were never wasted. When they left, the land felt quieter, as if holding on to a secret. Later that afternoon the riders returned. 3 men this time, their horses spread wide, blocking the open ground. Eli stepped forward, placing himself between them and the shack. Eliza stood just behind him, Thomas gripping her skirt. One of the men smiled, though his eyes held little warmth. "Heard this place was empty," he said. "Seems we were misinformed." "It's not for sale," Eliza replied before Eli could speak. The man's gaze slid toward her, slow and measuring. "Everything has a price." Eli felt the old anger stir, sharp and dangerous. He kept his voice low. "Best you ride on." The men laughed, but there was tension in it now. They did not move closer, yet they did not leave. After a long moment, they turned their horses, dust rising again as they rode off. The silence they left behind was heavy with promise. Eliza's knees weakened once they were gone. Eli caught her arm without thinking. The touch was brief, but it sent a current through them both. She looked up at him, startled, then steadied herself. "Thank you," she said. Eli released her hand, stepping back. He did not trust himself to speak. That night the fire burned low as they shared a simple meal. Thomas laughed once at something Eli said, a rare sound that caught them both off guard. Eliza felt warmth spread through her chest, followed closely by fear. Joy, she knew, was fragile. The land had taught her that anything worth holding could be taken without warning. After Thomas fell asleep, Eliza sat by the fire, mending a tear in a shirt. Eli watched the steady movement of her hands, the same hands that had repaired the shack, that had lowered a coffin into the ground. He wondered how much strength a person could hold without breaking. "I won't bring trouble to your door," he said suddenly. "If they come back, I can leave." Eliza looked at him, the firelight catching in her eyes. "Running won't keep us safe," she said. "And I'm tired of facing things alone." The words hung between them, honest and unguarded. Eli felt something loosen inside his chest, something he had kept locked away. A Wild West love story, he thought, was never gentle. It was carved out of fear and choice. Still, neither moved closer. Outside, the wind rose again, carrying with it the distant sound of hooves. Whether they belonged to friend or foe was impossible to tell. Eli reached for his hat, his resolve hardening. Eliza pressed a hand to her son's shoulder, her gaze steady despite the storm gathering beyond the walls. Love felt possible in that moment, close enough to touch, yet fragile as frost beneath the sun. And the land, unforgiving and watchful, waited to see what they would risk to keep it. The wind did not settle with the night. It prowled around the shack, testing every board Eliza had repaired, tugging at the roof like an impatient hand. Eli stayed awake, seated near the door, his back straight despite the ache that lived in his bones. He had slept lightly for years, ever since the night he rode home too late and found nothing left to save. Sleep felt like a promise he no longer trusted. Near dawn the sound came again, hooves closer now. No effort to hide them. Eli stood and eased the door open, the cold air cutting across his face. 3 shapes moved through the pale light, darker than the land around them. The same men. They rode with purpose now, no longer pretending to pass by. Eli's jaw tightened. This was the moment the frontier always demanded, when a man learned what he was willing to lose. Eliza woke to the shift in the air. She rose quietly, pulling on her boots, her heart beating hard but steady. Fear had walked beside her too long to surprise her now. She wrapped her arms around Thomas, whispering calm words she did not fully believe. When the riders stopped, the silence was sharp enough to wound. One of the men dismounted, boots crunching against frost. "We gave you time," he said. "Didn't expect you to use it wisely." Eli stepped forward, the space between them closing. "There's nothing here for you." The man's smile faded. "That's where you're wrong." Eliza saw them what they wanted, not just land, but control, the kind that came from taking what others could not protect. The old West town was too far to hear trouble. The forgotten trails offered no witnesses. This was frontier life laid bare. The men spread out, one circling wide. Eli's mind raced. He could fight, maybe hold them off long enough for Eliza and Thomas to run, but run where? The land offered little shelter, and winter was tightening its grip. He glanced back at Eliza, meeting her eyes. In that look passed a question and an answer neither spoke aloud. She shook her head slightly. She would not leave him to face this alone. Not again. A shot rang out, not aimed to kill, but to warn, the sound cracking the fragile calm of morning. Thomas cried out, clutching Eliza's coat. She pulled him close, her own fear burning hot now, edged with anger. She had buried one man already. She would not bury another if she could help it. From the ridge came a sudden shout, then another. Shapes appeared where the land dipped low, riders moving fast and sure. The native family, joined by 2 others, their presence unexpected and undeniable. The men froze, surprise breaking their confidence. For a moment, everything held still. Eli felt hope rise, thin but fierce. Help had come, unasked, just as it sometimes did in the stories whispered along forgotten trails. The lead rider cursed under his breath. He glanced between Eli and the newcomers, calculating. "This isn't over," he said, backing toward his horse. "You can't hide forever." They mounted quickly and rode off, their retreat marked by dust and bitter looks cast over their shoulders. The land exhaled. Eliza's legs gave way, and she sank to her knees, Thomas still in her arms. Eli rushed to her side, steadying them both. This time he did not pull away. His hand remained on her shoulder, solid and real. The native woman approached and placed a hand over Eliza's, her eyes kind but grave. She spoke softly, a warning carried in tone if not words. Trouble had been delayed, not ended. As the sun climbed, exhaustion settled in. The danger had passed for now, but it had left a mark. Eli felt it pressing against his chest, the knowledge that staying meant risking everything he had already lost once. Later, as the others rode away, Eliza and Eli stood beside the shack, the land stretching wide and indifferent around them. Thomas slept inside, worn out by fear. "They'll come back," Eli said. Eliza nodded. "I know. I could draw them off," he continued, the words heavy. "Lead them away from here." Her breath caught. The thought of being left again, of watching another man ride toward danger, clawed at her chest. "And if you don't come back?" Eli did not answer right away. He looked out over the plains, remembering the promises he had failed to keep, the people he had not saved. "Then you'll live," he said finally. "That has to count for something." Eliza stepped closer, her voice low and fierce. "You think living is just breathing?" Tears burned her eyes, but she did not let them fall. "I have done that. It is not enough." Their faces were close now, the space between them trembling with unspoken truth. Eli felt the pull of it, the dangerous hope he had sworn never to trust again. A Wild West love story was not meant for men like him, men who carried too much silence. Yet here it was, asking everything. A distant sound broke the moment. More riders far off, but moving fast, too many to count. Eli turned toward the horizon, dread settling in his gut. The past had found them again. Eliza followed his gaze, her hand finding his without thought. Neither pulled away. The land held them there, balanced between flight and fight, love and loss, as the thunder of approaching hooves grew louder, and the future narrowed to a single breathless choice. The thunder of hooves rolled closer, shaking the ground and the hearts of those waiting. Eli stepped forward, placing himself between the shack and whatever came next, his body calm even as his thoughts raced. Eliza tightened her grip on his hand, then let go, not because she wanted distance, but because she understood what this moment asked of them both. The riders crested the low rise, but they were not the men from before. These came slower, their posture different, less hungry. At their head rode an older man with a weathered face and a star pinned dull against his coat. The law, thin as it often was out here, had finally found its way onto the forgotten trails. Behind them, farther off, dust marked another retreat. The earlier men had chosen not to press their luck again. The sheriff reined in and took in the scene, the shack, the land, the people standing their ground. He listened as the native riders spoke, their words steady and measured. He listened as Eli spoke too, plain and honest, telling of threats made and lines crossed. There was no boasting, no call for blood. Just truth laid bare. The sheriff nodded slowly. "Those men have been trouble from one end of the territory to the other," he said. "We'll see they don't return." Promises in the Old West were not always kept, but sometimes they were enough. The riders turned back the way they had come, the sound of hooves fading into distance once more. Silence returned, softer now. Eliza sank onto the step of the shack, her strength finally giving way. Eli sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. For a long moment neither spoke. They listened to the wind, to the land settling back into itself. "I was ready to watch you right away," Eliza said quietly. "I hated myself for it." Eli looked at her, truly looked, and saw the fear she carried and the courage beneath it. "I was ready to go," he admitted. "Because leaving is what I know?" Thomas stepped out then, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He looked between them and climbed onto Eli's knee without asking. Eli stiffened at first, then relaxed, one hand resting gently on the boy's back. Something inside him shifted, a weight easing just a little. Days passed, the men did not return. Winter loosened its grip slowly, giving way to a hesitant spring. Eli stayed. At first, it was just to help mend fences and set the land right. Then it was to share meals, to walk the edge of the property at dusk, to laugh quietly at Thomas's small victories. Eliza watched him, waiting for the moment he might pull away. It did not come. Instead, trust grew like grass after rain, fragile at first, then steady. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft fire, Eli spoke of his past. Of the family he lost, of the silence he had worn like armor. Eliza listened, her hand resting over his, not trying to fix what could not be fixed. Just being there. "I thought love was something the land took from you," Eli said. "Turns out it's something you have to choose to keep." Eliza smiled, tears bright in her eyes. "We choose every day," she said. The shack grew stronger with each repair, each shared effort. The old West town, hearing that trouble no longer lingered, began to send trade their way. The native family passed often, sometimes stopping, sometimes just offering a nod from the ridge. Boundaries remained, but respect ran deep. Thomas thrived. He learned to ride with Eli walking beside him, learned the names of birds and stars. At night he slept without fear, the sound of wind no longer a warning but a lullaby. One morning, Eli stood at the edge of the land, looking out over the fields that had once been nothing but dust. Eliza joined him, slipping her hand into his. "This place," he said, "it doesn't feel empty anymore." She leaned into him. "Neither do we." They did not speak of forever. The Old West taught people to live in the present, to take peace where it came. But when Eli built a new door for the shack, stronger than the last, and carved their initials small and careful into the frame, it felt like a promise all the same. Years later, travelers would pass that way and see a sturdy home where a broken one once stood. They would feel the quiet there, the kind that did not weigh heavy, but settled gentle around the heart. Some would say it was just another story of frontier life, of Western survival carved from hardship. But for Eli and Eliza, it was proof that love could take root even in unforgiving soil. That silence could learn to speak again. That hands once used only to endure could build something meant to last. As the sun set behind the hills, the land glowed warm and wide, no longer empty, but held.